Hi there, welcome. Now this is going to be part of a series of videos in which I'm going to be showing you how to construct a floral applique ensemble, which you can sort of see etched out here. Now I do want to mention that the actual overview of this ensemble and where I go in depth into what we're actually going to be doing is linked in the description box down below. So go ahead and take a gander at that if you're unfamiliar with the actual project we're attempting. But that being said, this video can be appreciated on its own if you're not here for this project, because we're going to be teaching you how to do a bit of pattern manipulation. We're going to show you how to take a straight skirt and transform it into an A-line skirt. And we're going to be doing that using a widely available commercial pattern. Now I'm doing this because I feel that it's the easiest way for most people to sort of tag along and understand what's going on and actually make an A-line skirt for our underskirt. So this is the Vogue fitting shell, pattern number 1004, and I'm choosing this pattern because it's a fitting shell, it's a staple for Vogue. I don't think it's going anywhere. It's not something they're going to discontinue. So it'll be pertinent for a long time for the purposes of this video, which is a good thing. And also, it's a fitting shell. It's just a great pattern to have in your pattern stash. You can do a lot with it. It's sort of like working with a sloper where you can make lots of designs from these basic pieces that are going to fit to your body, and you can, yes, achieve a very good fit using this pattern. So just a good pattern to have all around. Now a couple of things I just want to make a quick note of. If you are here to construct the floral applique ensemble, then you don't absolutely have to follow along to make the underskirt that I'm going to be making. You can use whatever commercial pattern or self-drafted pattern you have that you think would make a good underskirt for this project. You don't have to do what I'm doing. Even this skirt right here, as is, just a straight skirt, would be fine as an underskirt. But for my purposes and anyone who's looking to achieve a look that's very similar to the look that I'm going after, I'm doing this video. So just a quick note there. Also, since this is a fitting shell, it may fit closer to the body than you're used to. So with that in mind, you're going to want to probably, if you feel you need to, go ahead and make up a muslin for the skirt and ensure that it's a comfortable fit, nothing too tight or binding, because most importantly, you want to make sure you have a good fit before you go manipulating those pieces into something else, right? And because this is a fitting shell, you're going to notice that there is a wide seam allowance along the side seam. And I just want to ensure that you don't get confused when you are manipulating the pattern. You're going to want to work from this dashed stitching line, not the solid line. Whenever you're doing any kind of pattern manipulation, you want to work from the stitching line, not the seam allowance, just so you don't get confused there. So now we're almost ready for some pattern manipulation, but first you're going to want to go ahead and retrace the skirt pieces onto separate sheets of paper. Why? Because as I mentioned, this pattern is going to serve you well in the future, so you want to make sure that it remains intact. So with that said, voila! So you'll notice that I've traced off the skirt front piece and overlaid it onto the original pattern piece. But all the seam allowances have been trimmed away because, as I mentioned, we want to be working with the stitching lines and manipulating from the stitching lines without including the seam allowances. What we're going to do is tack in all those seam allowances after we're done manipulating the pattern. So our first order of business is to locate the outmost dart, the one closest to the side seam. This is the dart we're going to be working from. And we're going to draw a straight line parallel to the grain line from the tip of this dart all the way down to the hem. And the hem allowance is cut away. Remember, all seam allowances are gone. So all the way down to that hemline. Next step is we're actually going to completely remove the actual paper from this dart that we extended that line from. Completely cut it away. So now we come to the actual manipulation portion. What essentially we'll be doing is taking this dart and transferring it all the way down to the hem. And I know that may seem a bit esoteric at first, but you'll see what I mean momentarily. What you're going to do is you're going to take your scissors or your rotary cutter and you're going to slice along this line that we drew all the way up almost to the tip of the dart. but not all the way through it. You don't want to create two separate pieces here. You want to create a hinge joint. So you can see, actually, I'll try and get you close here. I've actually made a little tiny mark here, and that's where I'm going to stop cutting. And the tip of my dart is slightly above that. So I'm not cutting all the way through to the dart, but almost. Just very tiny amount of paper we're going to leave unsliced. Now that you've created your hinge joint on your pattern piece, you're going to go ahead and set it atop some new pattern paper. And you're going to want to make sure that you lay your piece such that you have a lot of extra room on that side seam area, because that's where we're going to be widening the pattern out. And you want to make sure that you're going to have enough room to not only extend your pattern, but tack in some seam allowances after. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take that hinge joint and we're going to actually close that dart up at the top, right at the waistline, completely closed. And you'll notice what happens when you do that is that it creates a very dart-like shape at the hemline. It's really like you've transferred that dart to the hemline. And that's what I meant by transferring it there. It seems a little abstract to begin with, but really that's essentially what you've done. And now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take some Scotch tape, tape that down, tape that shut up at the waistline, that dart that is now closed. And then you're going to want to tape the actual legs of the dart to your pattern, your new pattern paper that you've laid it on top of. So now that we've got our taping done, we've taped our dart closed up at the waist and we've taped our actual pattern piece to the pattern paper that we've laid it upon, we're going to measure the distance of this space we've opened at the hemline. And I've gone ahead and labeled the dart legs A and B. So we're going to be taking the measurement of AB, and I'm just going to get my tape measure, and I'm going to measure that right along the hem. And it really is just about 3.5 inches for me. That measurement is going to vary depending on the size of your pattern. Now that is not the measurement we're going to be using. What we're going to do is we're going to actually take half that measurement. So in my case, half of 3.5 is 1 3/4 inches. So that 1 3/4 inches we're going to tack onto the side seam over here. And what we're going to do is, I've already done it over here, and I've actually labeled it point C, and I've said that it equals 1/2 AB. So half the distance of AB, once again, just to prevent any sort of confusion. And what you're going to do is you're just going to take that 1/2 AB distance, 1 3/4 inch for me, and you're going to follow the general slope of that hemline right along the corner. You're going to measure out from that side seam and then mark point C. Now we're going to go from point C here, and we're going to draw a straight line up, which I've sort of laid out against my ruler right there, on up to the sort of widest area of the hip portion of the skirt. Now, what you mainly want to focus on here is getting a nice line, a nice straight line that falls in line with the area above the hip, so that you're not creating any sort of awkward curvature along this line, that it's a nice, smooth, continuous line. So this is sort of the slope that's working best for me right here. It actually kind of extends on up to the shorten or lengthen line of this pattern for me. And I'm just gonna draw that in. And you can see how that sort of creates a very nice flow along that side seam. Next, we're going to try and create a more squared off angle here on point C. So I'm just going to actually bring up this line a little, extending out from the original side seam that we had on this skirt, till it gives a little more of a perpendicular look. So now we are almost done. Our last little bit of business is to actually fill in the hemline from points A to B. So we're actually just filling in that stitching line along the space that we opened up at the hemline. And then we're going to add a hem allowance. We're going to add a side seam allowance along that new side seam that we've created. We're going to add or put back a waistline seam allowance. And we're not going to be adding a center front seam. So I'm going to trim away this little bit of excess paper I have here, and it's going to remain as is because this piece will be placed on the fold of the fabric so we get a continuous skirt front piece. And so here is the skirt all cut out and ready to go with the seam allowances added. I added 5/8 of an inch everywhere except obviously the center front, which I mentioned is going to be placed on the fold, the waistline, the side seam, and yes, even the hem, which seems like a narrow hem allowance, but for our purposes in which we're creating an underskirt, for our overskirt, we are going to be doing a narrow hem. So your skirt front is all altered and ready to go. Yay! And guess what? Now we have to do the skirt back. Maybe not so fun, but the good news is it's the same exact procedure all over again, with one minor exception. That being, here I've got the skirt back all altered. You'll notice the center back here, we have kept a seam allowance, whereas in the skirt front, remember we got rid of it because we were going to place it on the fold of the fabric because we didn't want a center front seam down the front of our skirt. Here in the back, we need a way to get in and out of our skirt, and we're choosing to do a back zipper, or I'm choosing to. So I'm going to have to put in that 5/8 inch seam allowance there to accommodate a zipper. So that's the big difference. But other than that, everything else is the same. And now the final little step in our process is putting in some notches, because this pattern doesn't actually happen to have any. So along the center back seam, you'll want to go ahead and put in a notch, probably right about where you would insert the zipper. That's generally where patterns place one, so 7 to 9 inches down. And then on the side seam, we're going to want to put some notches, or at least a notch. So what you do is you take your skirt front and your skirt back, and you lay one on top of the other along the seam lines, not on the actual seam allowances, but right on that stitching line. And your pattern side seams should be the same length. I mean, that is an important note. If they're not, you may need to tweak it a bit, but mine are both 23 inches long, which I checked. So when I go to overlay them, they line up well. And that way, now I can go up and I can just put in a notch on the side seam. So I'm going to put one up here in the upper quadrant of my skirt, and then I'm going to fold it back, see where I drew my little notch, and mark it on my skirt back. So my skirt front and skirt back both have a notch. And if you want to do another notch in the lower quadrant of the skirt, then go ahead as I've done, and I've done a double notch here on the skirt front, folded it back, and seen where I've drawn, and put in another double notch right on the skirt back so that the notches are in the same place. So then when I go to cut this out in actual fabric, I'll have an easy time matching up my skirt side seams. So there we have our altered pieces from a straight skirt into an A-line skirt using the Vogue fitting shell. These pieces are actually ready to be put on some fabric and cut out of actual fabric. So I will see you soon for the next video in this series where we actually make the underskirt of our chosen fabric. Yay! See you soon. Bye-bye.